Your readers are going to be able to see through the fact that you wanted an enemies to lovers trope there or whatever, and then you sort of kind of made up a conflict for these two characters to have, but it's not really a conflict, and so they're not really enemies, and so does the trope even hold up water? Does that make sense?
Welcome to the Plottery, where I teach writers just like you how to make storytelling become second nature.
Hi, hello. I know, it's been a year. I'm back. Surprise! So I thought that for my grand coming back, I would kick it off with a video on 10 mistakes that you might be making as a new writer. I know, I'm coming in hot. I'm coming in controversial. It's exactly how I like to do things. These mistakes were handpicked by me based on my experience with people that I worked with, manuscripts that I've edited, and just things that I've read. Let's just jump into it. The first mistake is overcomplicating your plot instead of focusing in on your story purpose. Okay, what do I mean by this? So if you're unfamiliar with the term story purpose, it's basically your core question about your story, your thematic argument. It's like my bread and butter. It's like the thing that I absolutely I just love it. It's just like, it's the thing. It's the thing for me. Okay, story purpose. That's my keyword. Anyway, I get these bulky manuscripts and they come with so many plot points, and it's like this happens and then this happens and then that happens and then this is a plot twist and then oh my god, you did not see this coming, there's another plot twist. You get the point. What I mean by narrowing down your story purpose is once you actually discover what your thematic question is and what the point of the story that you're writing is, the plot will become that much simpler, much more straightforward. You will eliminate all of the fluff, you will eliminate the need for having plot twists and for having a bunch of different stuff happen just because you don't know how to fill a book. If you know the story purpose, immediately realizing what your plot needs to be becomes a lot easier, okay? So basically, if you are filling your book with just a bunch of plot points just so that, you know, stuff keeps happening and you keep your story interesting, it will actually have the opposite effect on most of your readers and you'll find them snoozing. So, food for thought. Anyway, that brings me to mistake number 2, and that is neglecting character development. Now, I don't care how awesome your plot is. If I don't connect with your character, I just will not care about the story, and I can promise you that this is the case for most people out there, okay? If you deliver the most delicious plot, but the characters who carry out the plot are just flat and boring and they could be replaced by absolutely anyone else, then that's not good. Characters need to come first. Characters are the heart of your story. So make sure that before you have your plot, you actually have a logical character progression for whatever characters you place as your main characters in your story. They should be the building blocks. They should carry the story, okay? It's not going to be your plot. It's going to be the choices that your characters make and why they make them and whether they change throughout the story. So always prioritize your character arcs before you jump into the plot, because your character arcs should be influencing the plot, okay? Your character arcs should actually be driving the plot. The way that they change should impact how the story changes. Let's go into mistake number 3, I think. And this is a sore spot for me because I used to do this. So yeah, here we go. Mistake number 3 is head hopping and disjointed narratives. So there seems to be a very interesting trend where a lot of writers just sort of jump on this omniscient narrator, okay? So they'll say they're using the omniscient narrator to write their story, and by doing that, they're allowed to head hop. Head hopping is when you change narrative perspectives in the middle of a paragraph or a sentence from one character to another without logical reason. That's what head hopping is. That was a definition straight from my head, so I don't know whether that's like the official definition that Google or did the dictionaries might have for you, or if that even exists. But anyway, that's besides the point. If you head hop, what you're doing is you are creating a very confusing story for your readers to follow. they're not gonna know who the protagonist is, who the narrator is, who they're supposed to follow, who they're supposed to listen to. This is why I usually recommend starting with close narratives to my clients anyway. So start with first person or third person close. Omniscient narrators shouldn't be used unless you have a very, 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 very strong purpose for using them. Have a reason as to why your narrator is omniscient. Why do they know all of these things? And why are they telling us all of these things? That's a very important thing to know if you decide that you're going to go down the route of using an omniscient narrator. You have to have a reason. You can't just, oh, here you go. Here's all the information. Here's everything that you need to know, reader. I'm going to go from this character's head to that character's head, and I hope that it all clicks for you. It's not going to. It's going to feel very jarring if you have an omniscient narrator but no reason to have an omniscient narrator logically, because we are just not used to reading stories that way. If you do use an omniscient narrator and you really want to do that, you have to have an incredibly strong voice. If you are adamant on using an omniscient narrator, I would recommend doing a lot of research on it. Listen to me, please listen to me, because I see this so often, and it doesn't read well. You might think it reads well, but it doesn't. I promise you. It doesn't. Not unless you have a reason and a really, really, really strong voice. Okay, let's go on to the next mistake, and that is not reading enough. I hear this argument a lot from writers that, I'm a writer, I don't need to read. Writers don't read. We write. When you read with purpose and you read within the genre that you're writing in, you're bound to sort of discover certain ways of writing, certain tropes, certain styles and tendencies and things that authors within that genre that you're writing often use. And this is important because you maybe sometimes want to keep up with the industry standards. And B, maybe you want to deviate from the industry standards. Maybe you want to do something original, do something new. How can you do something new if you don't know what's current and old and overused and whatever? You need to do your research, you need to do your reading in order to be able to write better. And again, this doesn't only apply to your own genre that you're writing in. I think it's really beneficial to read like a wide variety of books. And I've never felt more inspired than when I went through like a big reading phase, and I got sources of inspiration and sources of motivation and ideas from books that I never thought I would get inspiration from. I actually got a massive portion of inspiration for my own fictional book from a nonfic book, I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. That was a massive source of inspiration for me for my book, because my book deals with family issues and mother-daughter relationships. And this was something that I read literally just for a pastime, literally just because I was curious, and it ended up being a really good sort of comp title for me to research and use in my own writing. So yes, I do encourage reading. Please read. Please don't be one of those writers that thinks they're too good for it. Nobody's too good for reading. Come on, just do it. The next mistake is restarting the project every time you get a new idea. Guilty. I've been there. I think we've all been there. But what's important to remember is that you are going to keep getting new ideas the longer you write. Okay, you're going to get new ideas. By the time you finish your first draft, you're going to get new ideas in the last chapter. I can promise you that. Like, that happens, and that's totally normal. But I don't want you to just go back and edit the entire project or restart the whole thing based on that new idea just because it's a new idea. All you're going to do by doing that is waste your time. So instead, what I like to do is start a chapter treatment, and this is a completely separate document that I keep on the side of my manuscript. And I update stuff in that chapter treatment rather than in my manuscript, okay? It's a lot easier, first of all, because the manuscript is huge. By the time you get to the end, the manuscript is huge. You're not going to be able to find your way around it. But second of all, it's just so much neater that way, and it means that I can keep on writing whatever the hell I want with these new ideas in mind, but I've put them down in my chapter treatment, which is a much smaller document, and I just know that I can keep track of all of these ideas in that document, and I don't have to keep going back and editing things because I've written it down, and I know that I'm going to tackle it in the next draft, and I can just keep on moving with the current draft with the new ideas in mind. The next mistake is overloading your project with unnecessary descriptions. So what I mean by this is, obviously I love to write descriptions. I love to read nice descriptions. They're great for tone. They're great for atmosphere building. But ask yourself, what are the things that you actually need to describe? Okay, not everything needs to be described. Not everything needs to be explained. You don't have to give us the character's daily routine and every single piece of item of clothing that blah, 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 and every single item of clothing that they're wearing that day. That's just stuff I don't care about as a reader. Okay, you might mention just something to build an image in my head, but keep lengthy descriptions to things that actually matter. So if you are trying to build up a tone or atmosphere, you're trying to lengthen the pacing of that particular scene, that's when you want to go into descriptions. But again, don't overload it. You don't need to describe as much stuff in as much detail as you might think that you do. Readers are pretty capable of sort of filling in the gaps. So what you need to learn how to do is just give us enough detail that we have somewhat of an image, but you still give us the freedom and the trust to fill in the blanks for ourselves and just craft how that scene looks like or how that person looks like in our heads. Because it's never going to be the same as you. Our reader's never going to see your book the same as you see it. I'm sorry to burst the bubble, but no matter how well you describe it, they're going to see something different. So you might as well just allow them a little bit of a break and a little bit of freedom to create what they want inside their head. The next mistake that I have seen some newbie writers do is rushing to publish their book. And this is a common theme among, self-published writers who have never really done it before or haven't done their research on it. So you might think that self-publishing is like really easy and all you have to do is press publish. But I promise you it's not. It's a lot harder than it seems. So do your research before you actually, first of all, just decide whether, you want to do self-publishing or you want to go the traditional route. Because that's a massive decision in and of itself. And if you decide that you do want to self-publish, there's so much that goes into it. Deciding to self-publish is akin to deciding that you're going to start your own business. Obviously, if you're just writing for yourself and you just want to publish because it's fun, do it. The next mistake that really peeves me when I see it is when writers rely on tropes or they force tropes into their novels just because they think, it's a popular thing and people are going to want to read this, so I'm going to include it so that I can have something to market with. If a trope doesn't fit into your novel, into the plot that you've planned out, into the character that you have as your protagonist, then don't use that trope, because that's just going to be very see-through. Okay, your readers are going to be able to see through the fact that you wanted, an enemies to lovers trope there or whatever. And then you sort of kind of made up a conflict for these two characters to have, but it's not really a conflict, and so they're not really enemies. And so does the trope even hold up water? Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. The next mistake is lack of research. And now, I don't want you to think that just because you are writing a contemporary book that is set in our day and age, or you're writing a completely made-up fantasy world, or you're writing a completely made-up sci-fi dystopian world, that you get away without doing research. You don't. You still have to do plenty of research for every book that you write. If you're writing historical, obviously you're going to want to research the worlds and the facts and the time period and whatnot. But so much more than just facts comes into play when you are writing a book. I think most importantly, psychology. Psychology is going to be a huge factor if you are a writer. Most of the coaching calls that I have with my clients or my students, they usually kind of come down to psychology. And someone actually pointed this out to me. They were like, oh my God, I had no idea how much human psychology I had to actually learn to be a writer. How much of it I have to actually research in order to write really good characters and really good emotions and reactions and things like that. So again, whatever kind of project you're writing, you can't get away from it without doing research. And the last mistake is thinking that the famous advice of show don't tell only applies to character actions. So usually what I'll see writers do is, because they don't want to outright say what a character is feeling, which of course, don't do that. Don't outright tell us what any character is feeling at any point. Just because they don't want to say that, what they do is they'll actually just rely on gestures and on body movements and on actions and things like that. So what the character is doing. And that can become so overbearing in dialogue, especially. I have edited a couple of manuscripts that have just kind of constant action and action, and then he sighed, and then she pursed her lips, and then he turned that way, and then he sighed again, and then she sighed, and then she exhaled, and then she glanced at him, and he glanced back, and she glanced over at the other side. You kind of get my point. So over directing your characters because you think that you're showing something instead of telling your readers, just don't. Just minimize it. Minimize the action. This is where I really like to say, get your internal monologue game on. Okay, internal monologue can help you out so much without being overbearing, and with sort of breaking apart those character actions and breaking apart descriptions and things like that. Because a lot of the stuff that you think you need to say is stuff that can be said through subtext or stuff that can be implied. You want to leave space for interpretation when you are writing for your readers. That's how you're showing them rather than telling them things. Don't explain things to them, just let them conclude. All right, I think that brings us to the end of this video. I am so excited to be back, and I have, anyway, I hope that this video, was a little bit helpful and that you're not making any of these mistakes. And if you are, don't worry. We've all been there, myself included. It is something that will hopefully get easier as you write more. So that said, go on, happy writing. I will see you in the next one. Bye!